Thank you all for listening to Chapter 3 of Control+Alt+Delinquents by B.A. Holland. I'm thrilled that you're enjoying the story so far and that you've gotten this far. Once again, thank you for being here, for being a fan, and for supporting the channel. The entire book will soon be available if it's not available already by the time you listen to this. I will attempt to have a new chapter daily, and at the very least, have the entire book available by the end of June, if not way earlier. If you can't wait that long, the story is available on Amazon to read on your e-reader. Please hit the like button and subscribe. It means a lot to me that I gain a fan base, and it's the only way I can get this audiobook channel monetized so that I can get reimbursed for the entertainment that I provide. In the future, I plan on providing short stories, more novels, and podcasts. But I do need your help and support to make it happen. All it takes is a few little clicks, so smack that bell. Thank you so much. I now present to you the Real Enough series, Control+Alt+Delinquents, Chapter 3. With a precise snip, Cassie used her sharp scissors to expertly cut the legs of Keith's jeans to fit Nettie's smaller frame. Despite being too small for any shoes in the house and wearing a shirt that hung a little long on her, she was no longer naked on the floor of Cassie's bedroom. The room, filled with wires and gadgets, looked like a mad scientist's laboratory as Cassie worked on Nettie. She carefully monitored the charging process of the Tesla-style batteries installed in Nettie's body through a glove charger that she had designed specifically for her. As Cassie watched the battery indicator on the palm of the glove display, 75% or 9 hours at optimal conservation, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her creation. As they waited for Nettie to come alive, Cassie spoke to her gently. "As soon as we get your network up and running, you'll finally get to meet your brother. I think I'm going to call you Nettie," she decided, choosing a name that reflected her dependence on a high-speed network data link to function optimally. The door to the house opened and Cassie hurried out, not wanting to give her son any reason to enter her bedroom where Nettie lay. With excitement building inside her, Cassie couldn't wait for Nettie to be fully activated and become a part of their family. Keith's eyes widened in surprise as he looked around the living room, his shoulders visibly sagging when he saw his mother enter. Her usually cheerful face was now tense and serious, causing a wave of concern to wash over him. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. Cassie shook her head, with a giddy grin that was apparent on her face. "No, everything's fine," she reassured him. "I just need your help with something, and I have a request to ask." "What is it?" Keith asked, curiosity piqued at his mother's mysterious behavior. "I need your help setting up a server room," Cassie replied. Keith raised an eyebrow in confusion and slowly shook his head, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Wait, you want me to come to work with you? At that place?" he said with disbelief. "I mean, I know where you work and all, but do you really want me to see all the weird stuff that goes down there?" Cassie couldn't help but smile at her son's reaction, leaning back in her chair with an amused look on her face. "Oh, so now my co-workers are a bunch of pervs?" she retorted playfully. "Well, aside from that, the server room is actually going to be set up in our garage, and once it's built, I don't want you going in there anymore." "In our garage? Why?" Keith asked incredulously. Cassie's expression turned serious again as she explained. "It's for security reasons. We deal with sensitive information at work, and I don't want anyone else having access to it. It's for a good reason, but I can't tell you until after we are done," Cassie said. "Where are you going to park the car?" "In the driveway," Cassie exclaimed. "Fair enough." Keith shook his head and wondered just what it was that her mother was up to. Cryptocurrency, data mining, starting her own gaming server farm. The ideas in his mind were endless, and he just didn't understand what it was. Either way, Keith had one question he couldn't resist. "Can I borrow some of it for gaming?" "No," Cassie said with a laugh and a tone in her voice that suggested that his request was completely absurd. This only gave him more questions for his never-ending curiosity. "Are you at least going to pay me for putting some of this together, since it doesn't really have anything I can use?" Cassie's face lit up with a wide, beaming grin that left him feeling confused and disoriented. It was as if her expression held some secret meaning, one that he couldn't quite grasp, but felt drawn to nonetheless. Her eyes sparkled with excitement and mischief, and he couldn't help but feel intrigued by whatever she had in store for him. Even without fully understanding it, there was something about this whole process that seemed appealing to him, almost as if it were meant for him all along. As the hours passed, the equipment steadily rose up and took its place. A sea of sleek black boxes, each one more powerful than the last, was connected by an intricate network of cables and wires. The air was thick with the hum of energy, and he could practically feel the immense power pulsing through the room. He counted countless terabytes of storage, insane processing power that could rival even the most advanced supercomputer, and solid-state drives that could all run at full speed without breaking a sweat. It was all relayed into a satellite dish on the roof and a broadband link to some unknown destination, a mysterious connection to somewhere beyond his understanding. It wasn't until he caught his mother loading software onto one of the servers that he realized what this elaborate setup was for. Artificial intelligence. That thought alone sent shivers down his spine. But before he could fully comprehend the implications, his mother ushered him away on trash duty, ordering him to dispose of all the cases and filler material that came with a petabyte of total memory. When he returned, carrying empty boxes and discarded packaging, he found the door locked behind him, leaving him to wonder just what secrets were being kept inside those secure walls. "I'll be out in a while. Go check on your homework and make sure that you don't have anything more to do, okay?" Cassie had to yell the demand through the thick door to the garage. With a heavy sigh, Keith retreated to his room and turned the lock on his door. He needed some space to think, but even with the physical barrier, he couldn't escape the digital world that awaited him. With a flick of his wrist, he activated his AR glasses and was immediately bombarded with messages from Jack, Dean, and Chris. His heart sank as he saw their names, knowing they would only add to his already elevated stress levels. Choosing to ignore them for the moment, he selected Jack's avatar and it appeared before him like a hologram come to life. "Dude, she didn't take you out of school again, did she?" Jack asked. "No, she needed my help with something," Keith said. "Oh, must have been important for her to take you out of school. Hey, guess what I was working on last night?" Keith's head shook, mirroring the movement of his avatar on screen. He couldn't help but admire the lifelike quality of their creations. They had put in countless hours perfecting every detail. The avatars were a true reflection of themselves, down to the smallest freckle and stray hair. Whenever they logged into their virtual world, it was as if they truly stepped into another version of themselves. It was their shared hobby, and one that brought them even closer together. "Sometimes I scare myself with how effortlessly I can manipulate these menus," Jack said with a self-satisfied smirk, his arms outstretched as if he were conducting a grand orchestra. Keith took a cautious step back when Angelica appeared, her usual book bag slung over her shoulder and her hair perfectly pinned in place. Despite the fact that she was a mere hologram, she looked exactly like her real-life counterpart. You don't have to wonder what it would be like to have her full attention anymore. With some of your mom's advanced AI programming, we could make that happen," Angelica cooed, gesturing towards the file on her tablet. Keith looked at her with a mix of sadness and longing, his expression projected for his best friend to see through their shared AR glasses. Jack raised an eyebrow and opened his arms in confusion. "What?" "She was designed specifically for me by you. You only create avatars of our classmates when they've wronged us in some way," Keith admitted, feeling a twinge of guilt for burdening his friend with such a task. "I thought you were supposed to be too autistic to understand that kind of stuff," Jack quipped, folding his arms after transferring Angelica's file to Keith's tablet. "Look, I don't trust her. She doesn't have your best interests at heart." Keith couldn't help but stare at the holographic image of Angelica sitting on his bed, her delicate features etched perfectly into existence. He sat down beside her, not caring that Jack could see him through the video call. "I know, but even if my mom could program her with AI, it wouldn't really be Angelica anymore," Keith muttered wistfully, gazing into the artificial eyes of the girl he had long admired from afar. "Nah, but imagine this. You could have a stunning girlfriend who didn't have to go to school with you. A girl who would pay attention to you and be just as attractive as the real Angelica on the surface." "That wouldn't be Angelica, though," Keith replied. "Yeah, you've got that right," Jack said with a laugh. "At least this version of Angelica will listen to you if you program her with your mom's advanced AI technology. I doubt my mom is going to let me borrow any of her programs, and I like Angelica for who she is, not some artificial version that doesn't even exist." "Angelica doesn't love you, man. I'm telling you," Jack insisted. "Why do you think that?" Keith's brows furrowed behind his AR glasses as he watched Jack's avatar in his virtual room lean back and sigh. Then his friend pointed around at nothing in particular, as if gesturing to things only he could see. She's constantly going to your so-called friend's house all the time, and suddenly they're never available anymore. It's painfully obvious what's going on. Keith asked, oblivious to what. Exactly. Okay, seriously, tomorrow evening ask Angelica to hang out with you. I'll be standing by for when she blows you off. And trust me, I'm taking my damn drone with me. We're going to launch it, and you're going to see her skip her fine ass directly over to Chris or Dean's house for some of that forbidden sweet loving from your so-called friends. Keith couldn't help but flinch when he saw Jack point his hands towards the artificial representation of Angelica's backside when he mentioned her fine ass. His stomach twisted uncomfortably at the thought of Angelica being with someone else. He felt a mix of anger and desperation rise within him, but he couldn't deny the sinking feeling in his gut that Jack might be right. Keith's virtual avatar flickered as he spoke, trying to convey a sense of confidence and trust in his relationship with Angelica. But Jack could see through the facade, his own avatar betraying Keith's true feelings. No matter how convincingly Keith spoke, his body language gave him away, a sign that even the most advanced technology couldn't hide. Trust is something you have to earn in the real world, Jack responded sharply. And let's be real here, Angelica hasn't earned anything. In fact, she's depleted your trust points, and you just haven't checked your point bank yet to realize it. Keith sat in stunned silence, processing Jack's words. He had always considered Dean and Chris to be his close friends, but now he wasn't so sure. She goes over there for homework, he finally said, defending Angelica. You're the genius with Asperger's and a mother who programs sex dolls for a living, Jack retorted, frustration evident in his voice. Think, man. As Keith tried to narrow his gaze in concentration, Jack slapped his head in frustration before suggesting they use drones to spy on Angelica if she went to one of her friends' houses. Deflated, Keith sat down next to the artificial replica of Angelica and held her hand. He didn't have his tactile feedback gloves or haptic vest on, but he still felt protective over her, even though she wasn't his real girlfriend. I'm not going to stalk my girlfriend, Keith said firmly. Fine. I'll do it myself. And when I record her riding Dean or Chris in their backyard, you can watch it on my high-definition TV in full infidelity, Jack replied, vanishing from the room as if he were never there. Left alone with the replica of Angelica, Keith took off his AR headset to make even her vanish, and pondered everything that was said. Feeling hurt by Jack's words, Keith tapped his headset to make a call and waited for Angelica to pick up. After 2 buzzes, the call was rejected. In a mix of conflicting emotions, Keith grabbed his skateboard and left his room. Part of him didn't want to become the stalker he promised himself he wouldn't be, but another part of him needed to prove Jack wrong. Despite his internal turmoil, Keith still considered Chris and Dean to be his true friends, even if Jack's words had momentarily shaken that belief. Keith made it as far as his driveway on the quaint cul-de-sac before deciding to venture beyond his neighborhood. He hopped onto his skateboard and glided down the long sidewalk that snaked by the towering high school and into other nearby neighborhoods. The bright sun beat down on him, casting a warm glow over the quiet streets. As he skated, Keith's mind was filled with thoughts of Angelica, Chris, and Dean, his friends who lived in the opposite direction. But something about Angelica didn't feel right anymore, so he focused on the bumps in the sidewalk instead. He had counted them before. There were over 150 on this particular stretch of road. It was a personal record for him, but also a way to distract himself from the pain and confusion he felt about Angelica's sudden change of heart. But thinking about his friends only brought up more questions and doubts. Jack, his only true friend, seemed to have all the answers. If only Keith could understand things as easily as Jack did. And yet, despite everything, Keith knew he still had one good friend in Jack, someone he could count on no matter what. But then he heard voices in the distance and realized that Billy and Marissa were slowly stalking him from behind. As someone with Asperger's syndrome, Keith often got lost in his own thoughts and could easily tune out the outside world. So when he turned around and saw Billy's unmistakable figure and heard Marissa's voice, it caught him off guard. He scrambled through his pockets, searching for his cell phone, a means to call for help, or at least have some form of protection. But then he remembered why he wanted to be alone in the first place. He had left his phone at home. He was completely vulnerable and at the mercy of these 2 bullies. Keith let out a frustrated sigh and sat down on the sidewalk, flipping his skateboard over on his lap. He spun the wheels absent-mindedly as he thought about how things had come to this point. Despite everything, he was grateful for at least having one good friend in Jack. But as for everything else, he just didn't understand. And that's when he noticed the stick in Marissa's hand and braced himself for whatever was about to happen next. "Keith, you asshole! Where's Jack? We know he did it!" Billy yelled. Keith's heart pounded in his chest as he stood, trembling at the 150th bump on the sidewalk. He knew he had to avoid whatever was coming for him, but going any further would take him beyond his limits. And going back meant facing the wrath of Billy and Marissa. But then Marissa's shrill voice cut through the air, full of malice and rage. "The whole school saw me naked because of you, you miserable fuck." Keith's stomach dropped as he felt a surge of panic and humiliation wash over him. Before he could even process what was happening, Billy joined in with his own threats. "When you crawl back to your friend, tell them what we did to your face was revenge for what he did. This is on him." Keith's mind raced as he searched for a way out. He couldn't run past the 150th bump. In Keith's mind, that was too far. But staying here meant facing the bully's brutal punishment. In a moment of desperation, Keith made a split-second decision and ran out into the street, hoping to grab onto a car with the skateboard under his feet for a quick escape. The screeching tires and blaring horn filled his ears as he clung onto the back bumper of the speeding car. The driver honked furiously at him but didn't slow down, unaware of Keith's presence. As the car picked up speed, Keith frantically tried to steady himself on his skateboard while avoiding being thrown off by the rough pavement. He prayed that the car would either slow down or drop him off somewhere safe before Billy and Marissa caught up to him. With each passing second, Keith could feel his heart racing faster than ever before. He could barely make out the distant shouts from his pursuers as they faded away behind him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he let go of the car and went flying onto the grass beside the road. Rolling and tumbling, Keith felt the world spin around him in a blur of blue and green. When he finally came to a stop, he saw his skateboard had caught up with him, and they both lay still on the grass. Adrenaline coursing through his veins, Keith quickly got up and checked himself for any injuries. He was lucky to not have broken anything, but the scrapes and bruises covering his body were nothing compared to what Billy and Marissa had planned for him. Without hesitation, he hopped back on his skateboard and raced back to his neighborhood. Looking back down the long stretch of road he'd come from, he couldn't even see his attackers anymore. Keith's heart was still pounding as he rushed home, determined to call Jack and find out why the bullies were after him. But as he rode toward safety, Keith couldn't shake the fear and unease that lingered in the pit of his stomach. He knew that whatever Jack had done at school must have been something truly terrifying if it made the bullies want to harm him so badly. Shaken and scared, Keith vowed to never cross paths with them again. Shoo. Cassie's stomach rumbled as she heard Keith re-enter the house, but she remained in the dimly lit garage with her microwave burritos and a gallon of water. The anticipation of her next big project was almost visceral as she carefully planned out each step. She noticed that Keith didn't knock on the door this time, which was unusual for him. Usually he would at least greet her when returning from his long outings on his board. However, Cassie assumed that he had finally understood her request to not disturb her while working. For months now, Cassie had been tirelessly working on a new type of advanced algorithm for her corporation's pleasure androids. This software would surpass all previous versions and allow for unprecedented levels of intelligence and self-awareness. Despite being forbidden by her company, Cassie couldn't resist the challenge and had poured her heart and soul into this personal project. The program boasted a basic personality structure that would evolve and develop upon installation, giving each AI its own unique identity. With bated breath, Cassie activated the servers and watched as the screens flickered to life with lines of code dancing across them. It was like witnessing a newborn baby coming into the world. Soon that brain would have a body to inhabit. A mix of excitement and trepidation filled Cassie's chest as she realized there was no turning back now. As the AI continued to self-program, Cassie busied herself on another computer, creating a false identity complete with fabricated birth certificates, adoption service forms, and an entire education history. Down to the minutest detail, such as computer-generated fingerprints on the android's fingers, she meticulously crafted a paper trail for their new lives. And with each simulated keystroke, Cassie felt both elation and fear wash over her. There was no telling how this experiment would turn out. But one thing was certain, she had created life. Name, Nettie Cameron. DOB, January 1st, 2010. Height, 4'9". Weight, 85 pounds. Hair, dark brown. Eyes green. Adoption date, January 26th, 2024. Cassie could hear Keith's muffled voice, tinged with annoyance, as he engaged in a heated conversation in his bedroom while immersed in the world of virtual reality. This was the perfect time to carry out her plan. With swift and precise movements, Cassie slipped out of the garage and expertly dodged every creaking floorboard in the house as she made her way to her bedroom. Inside, she carefully lifted Nettie's lifeless body from the ground and carried her with unwavering grace to the garage. There, she gently laid her on the workbench next to the server tables, pushing aside her half-eaten burritos. With practiced ease, she reached around to the back of Nettie's neck and pressed hard on a button hidden beneath her skin, behind her right ear. A faint click echoed through the room as Nettie's small form jolted and twitched slightly. Cassie's eyes flickered to the computer monitor where she saw words scrolling across the screen, confirming that her actions had succeeded. Satellite uplink established. Uploading autonomic routines. Data send receive established. Starting short-term RAM. Beginning transfer of personality subroutine. The deep rumbling of computer processors echoed through the garage as Keith stepped out of his clothes, stained green from a day of exploring with Jack. Despite his curiosity about what his mother was doing in there after their call, he had promised not to look into it at her request. As he threw his clothes into the dirty basket in the corner of his room, he couldn't help but notice the bruises on his body, turning darker shades of blue from the tumble he took earlier. Locking the door to his bedroom, he avoided talking about Angelica by discussing the bullies and their anger instead. Keith couldn't shake the thought of Jack selling a VR mesh of Marissa to a classmate, who then used it to create fake images of her on social media. He knew Marissa could be rude, but he didn't think it warranted such a harsh response. Their disagreement lingered in his mind as he flopped onto his bed, too exhausted to even brush his teeth. Saturday would be a much-needed day to sleep in and recover. His plans were simple. Sleep until his worried mother started pounding on his locked door, reassure her that he was alive, and then continue sleeping until noon. Maybe afterwards he would call Angelica for a date, but if she blew him off like usual, he'd happily spend the day with Jack. They could work on their virtual reality projects without bringing up the incident with Billy and Marissa. It would be a perfect day.